I want you to imagine for a second a white blood cell. And this white blood cell, he walks up to this red blood cell and he says, "Do you believe in humans?" The red blood cell says, "No way, man. I don't believe in humans." The white blood cell says, "Why not?" And the red blood cell says, "Have you ever seen one?" And the white blood cell says, "No." And the red blood cell says, "Well, then, it's stupid to believe in humans." If you got that, then you understand exactly why it is stupid to think that it's stupid to believe in God simply because you've never seen him. I'm not saying that every argument against God is stupid. I'm simply saying that the argument that you've never seen God and therefore it's stupid to believe in God is stupid. Now, this is a very, very, very difficult topic. And so we're definitely going to have to make multiple videos on this. This is legitimately the most endless topic that you could ever touch on because it's God. If it's dealing with the concept of existence itself. It's infinite yet finite. How do you make sense of this? This is legitimately a debate and a discussion that can go on forever. But we're going to try and use logic on this channel with everything in order to try and make sense of it. We're not going to quote scripture as evidence necessarily. We're not going to use stupid arguments like, well, we've never seen it, because that's not an argument, obviously, as it just showed. Obviously, humans exist. So who was wrong in what we just showed? Was it the white blood cell or the red blood cell? I mean, one of them didn't really take a stance, but the other one who did, clearly wrong. Humans do exist, and the fact that the red blood cell didn't see one didn't mean that they don't exist. So there are all different arguments that atheists make for why God is stupid. They're straw man arguments. They're child arguments. Like I've said in previous episodes, I was an atheist for 24 years of my life, and science is what actually convinced me that it was more likely than not that there was a God. And we're going to have to define God because there's a lot, that's a very ambiguous statement. There's a lot of different interpretations of what God means, what the existence of God means. So the atheists will kind of poke fun at the idea of God by suggesting that it's as irrational as believing in a flying spaghetti monster in the sky, because their view of God is that of a man sitting on a cloud chucking lightning bolts at us for his own amusement or whatever. I mean, it's legitimately it is a child. They believe it's childish to believe in God because their view of what God is childish. So of course, my rabbi, one of my rabbis, who's a Hasidic Orthodox rabbi, he said to me that that the reason why people believe that religion is childish is because those people stopped their religious education when they were a child, which makes perfect sense. I remember when my Reform rabbi asked me how I felt about God right before I was bar mitzvah. I said to him, I don't believe in God. He said, why not? And I said, because you guys say that the world is, 6,000 years old, and I know that fossils are much older. And he said, well, what if one day to us is not the same as one day to God? And I thought that that was just a cop-out argument. And the reality is that it's not a cop-out argument, but the fact that he couldn't explain any further depth to the idea of God suggests the bankruptcy of Reform Judaism, but that's another video. So, what is God? Is he a flying spaghetti monster? Is it a he? Is it a she? Is it a man in the clouds with lightning? Is it Zeus? Is it this guy that just puts all kinds of restrictions on us for his own amusement? No, it's legitimately none of these things if God exists. So, what God would be is a consciousness to existence. Not just a consciousness to existence, a self-aware level of consciousness to existence. That's it. If existence itself, all of existence, is conscious to a level of self-awareness, which there are different levels of consciousness, but a self-aware level of consciousness is the highest level of consciousness that I could think of. If existence is self-aware, there's a God. Simple as that. Now, the various attributes of what that means and the implications of that are vast and worthy of infinite discussion. But the very fact is that if existence itself is conscious to the level of self-awareness, there's a God. So, I believe that this is the case. And there's many reasons why I believe that this is the case, but when you look at even our scientific experiments, things like the double slit experiment, what they show is that there is that existence reacts to consciousness. Okay, so existence is reacting to consciousness, so it's clearly displaying one level of consciousness, at least, which is that it's capable of recognizing something and reacting to it, which is a level of consciousness. So, for those of you that don't know what the double slit experiment is, it's an experiment. It's many experiments, to be honest, but they all seem to follow the same trend. It's a very famous physics experiment. And what it seems to show, at least to me, is that consciousness is fundamental to order. And order is fundamental to existence. So what this really means is that consciousness is fundamental to existence. And if consciousness is fundamental to existence, then it would seem to me that existence would be conscious. And when you think about everything mathematically, which is that everything is a fractal. Okay, a fractal within a fractal within a fractal. I mean, that is what a fractal is. You can see that, like I said with the red blood cell and the white blood cell, there is levels of consciousness within our own body. So if it's within our own body, and the universe is fractal in nature, then you would believe that this is also above us and below us. And this is the case. And so, here's a very interesting mathematical observation of God that I kind of had one day when I was thinking about it, is that people will say, well, God is the interplay between the finite and the infinite, or, existence is the interplay between the finite and the infinite, which really means God. If God exists, then God is existence in and of itself. God has certain attributes that are only attributable to God and nothing else, which is that God is both the dweller and the dwelling. He's the message and the messenger. He is existence and consciousness at the same time. So this is something that is this is not found in any other place that we look. It's just it's a paradox and an inevitability, which is this is exactly what you see over and over when you're trying to think about God, is constant contradictions. Finite and infinite, paradox and inevitability. How can something be an inevitable thing and also paradoxical? It's like, that doesn't make sense. It implies that it's illogical and logical at the same time. This is another contradiction. And when you think about this in mathematical terms, do we have examples of this in math? Because I believe math is fundamentally how we understand everything, including God. Mathematics is the language of God, if God exists, because it is clearly the language to describe existence. Do we have examples of contradictions in mathematics? And are these examples of contradictions fundamental to an infinite, seemingly, number of aspects of the world that we observe? Well, the answer is yes. And one day I was sitting there and I was just thinking about God and math, and I came to this odd conclusion that God is an irrational number. Numbers are as rational as it gets, yet irrational numbers are totally rational. Think about it. They say, existence philosophically is the interplay between the finite and the infinite. There is no better example of this than an irrational number. An irrational number goes on forever, yet it never gets bigger. Pi never gets to 4, but it does continue. 3.14, blah, 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 infinite, yet it never hits 4. It's this paradox, this thought experiment that's very fascinating the more you think about it, where you stand in front of a wall and you walk halfway there, and then you walk another halfway there, and another halfway there, and another halfway there, and another halfway there, another halfway there, another halfway there. Theoretically, you will literally move forward infinitely. You will be able to never stop moving forward. Yet you'll never hit the wall that is supposedly at a finite distance away from you. How does this make sense? It's very difficult to wrap our minds around. It is the reality of infinity. There's no such thing as infinity outside of irrational numbers. The very fact that numbers can go on infinitely is evidence that existence is an irrational number. It doesn't exist that there's just this infiniteness to existence, because existence itself implies that it is encompassing of what exists and does not include anything else, because anything else outside of existence is non-existent, which means that it doesn't exist. So it cannot be included in anything. This is legitimately a paradox. It is something I think about literally like every single day. And it's what it implies to me, when you really, really, really give it a lot of thought, is that consciousness, once again, is fundamental to existence. And why this is because in abstract mathematics, there is nothing but quantities. Okay, the realm of abstract mathematics, there's nothing but quantities and interactions, which really leads you to there's nothing but consciousness. which interactions and quantities, nothing follows this like consciousness. Everything else deals in relativity that we know of. So, speed, strength, size. Big is only big compared to something smaller. Fast is only fast compared to something slower. You know, strong is only strong compared to something weaker. These are just, they're not fundamental. Okay, things that can be relative cannot be fundamental. Only the things that are absolute can be fundamental. And what is absolute is quantities, which means like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and it goes on. And interactions. So interactions is very difficult to describe, and I'm definitely gonna have to do a video on it later. But quantities is easy for us to wrap our minds around. Just count. This is as fundamental as it gets. It's as absolute as it gets. 2 is 2 no matter what. 3 is 3 no matter what. 1 is 1 no matter what. But taller is relative. Faster is relative. Smarter is relative. Stronger is relative. Nothing exists in the most absolute of mathematics and the most absolute and fundamental of existence besides quantities and interactions. And so if we try and think about this like this, where do we see this in our world? Because our world it's so filled with relativity. It's, this car is faster than this car, and this, is this house is bigger than this house. We think about the world in terms of relativity. But the reality is, if we think about the material world in terms of relativity, what we really mean by that is we think about the inanimate world in terms of relativity. But when you're going to think about the world in terms of consciousness, then you have to think about it in terms of quantity. And consciousness, the levels of consciousness are actually dictated by quantity and the interactions between quantities within abstract mathematics. That's something I'm going to get to in another video. I can't think about it off the top of my head. I'll need to think about it before that video. But it's easy enough to think you are one person, and I am one person, and someone else is one person. Consciousnesses are one, but at the same time, consciousnesses are. I would argue that consciousness comes from the interplay between two attributes. So, you are conscious of yourself because you are aware of something that's not yourself. And the reality is that the only thing that you are aware of that is not yourself is another consciousness. If you're in your car, that car is part of you in a very real sense. It's not separate from you. Your cell phone, your sword, your gun, your clothing, whatever it is that you're interacting with instantly becomes part of you. And as soon as it's under your control, it is part of you. So the only thing that is always separate from you is another consciousness. So we understand ourselves in relation to other consciousnesses. Now, if we extrapolate this up, if the red blood cell and the white blood cell had been a little bit more philosophical and a little bit less dismissive, and they maybe just got a beer together and thought about it a little bit longer, they would probably be able to come to these conclusions, or they would just, continue to be ignorant. But the conclusions that you will come to, if you logically think this out, is that this must be true of existence because it's true of abstract mathematics. And abstract mathematics describes existence. Guys, just because you can't see the being that you are a part of, that you are within, but that you are also separate from, doesn't mean it doesn't exist.